Hello, and welcome back to your next module. We're not going to get into the process flow. We'll be going through all of these things on here. Very similar to our previous protocol, if you've been trained before, we have two pathways. The consideration screening document, which you'll be seeing as new, where we can resolve this at low, and you're still going to do a student support plan and possibly a target support plan. At this one, if you can resolve at low, that is all you need to do. If not, you need to move to the full threat assessment. And remember, in path one, it needs to be an administrator and one other team member. And at path two, it needs to be 4 team members to break up all the interviews. And then you will resolve it you still could resolve it low, possibly, but most likely moderate, high, or imminent. Here is our new flow chart. You will be able to take a better look at this. But again, we're going to be going through all 7 of these steps. So what are our outcomes? It's really important to recognize that while we respond in these cases by involving the appropriate authorities and alerting the family of the potential safety risk, we do not proceed with the screening unless we also suspect a safety risk within the school or district community. So thinking through, if a student makes a threat, can that cause harm, and can they carry it out? The threat assessment process is not a predictive process. It is intended to analyze the situation and make decisions regarding appropriate next steps to mitigate the potential threat. It is important to note that the threat assessment and intervention process is a crisis procedure, not a disciplinary process. While it may be useful in determining facts regarding a situation that may lead to disciplinary consequences, not all threat assessments result in disciplinary outcomes. Many of the times we need to support the student with their mental health, self-regulation, and things like that. Furthermore, even when disciplinary action is taken, the schools should also document the other supports provided, addressing the factors that you're going to help support them. So thinking through this, remember again, we want to ensure that we determine the correct threat level and provide those interventions and supports as indicated. Other points to remember: that when a threat's received, it's safety first. No one is left alone until we can ascertain safety. This may mean simply assigning an additional personnel to support and monitor, or it may mean securing the student of concern while conducting a large-scale crisis procedure, which could possibly be a lockdown, depending on what the threat is. It's going to vary based on the nature of response. Another key point is that once a threat is brought to your attention, you must act now. Steps 1 and 2 are immediate over here: assessing the risk level and responding to the safety needs. And also remember that all students at low, moderate, high, and imminent will require that SSIMP or SIMP plan. Elements on this plan are customized to fit the situation, and we'll go over that in detail in the next module. And then also we will be monitoring communication efforts on all of our interview forms, and then thinking through, if we complete that consideration screener, that along with the SIMP plan is the only thing that's needed, but then you may move on to that full threat team. So we're going to be going through all of the new documents today in this module. So an administrator is the one who determines the need for a threat assessment, consideration, and screening form. But do remember, if the threat involves bombs, knives, guns that are currently in the student's possession, as specified in the Student Code of Conduct, you're going to immediately notify CMS Police, Student Discipline and Behavior Support, the Learning Community Office, and Communication Services, and you will follow the district's crisis response procedures. Based on this initial information, you will then proceed in the right direction. When an administrator receives the information about the potential or known threat to a student, staff member, or other person, you're going to investigate the facts, with this one other team member by interviewing the source and witness, and determine if there's a need to, at a minimum, continue with this consideration form that you'll be seeing, which is quite new. And I believe that you guys will be very happy with it, especially for some of our students that fall under the EC or 504 umbrella. Then also think through, would a reasonable person with this information suspect that there is a risk to staff, students, or school? If yes, then you are going to ensure that you document the consideration screening form and determine if you can resolve it at low, or if you need to move to that full threat assessment. If the threat is only indicating harm to the self, that initial person, then you would move to the CMS suicide protocol with your student services student services team member. If no, then you would continue on the path if it was to someone in the school. If it involves harm to others outside of the school's district capacity for direct intervention, community as a whole, parents, non-students, or other organizations, then you would bypass this process and then just call your SRO or CMS Police to follow through. If the target is a parent or guardian of the school, you should also think through, do you need to decide if there's a suspicion of abuse or neglect, and a DSS referral might need to be made based on why the student is making a threat. But again, if they're making a threat to a parent or guardian, then again, you would not do this process, but your SRO or CMS police would provide guidance. Okay. If there's no other additional safety concerns for anyone, you are going to document that on the consideration and screener form, and then also think through, is there any disciplinary action? If there's a violation being considered for threats that they've not yet acted upon, you can still decide to do this threat assessment, right? If they don't act on it. If they've enacted on it, if they've already done the threat that they've made, then you wouldn't do the threat assessment, then you would go to the discipline process. Because then if they've made a threat, actually acted on the threat, that's actually an incident of actually doing something and actually acting on it. So over here, you're going to have that administrator with one other team member. You're going to gain the specific information about the threat from the aggressor and any target or witnesses. I'm going to show you here the target, no, the witness for the student of concern interview, which is the same as we've done in the past. So this is exactly the same. There's no changes, but this is the interview form that you are going to use for your aggressor. Also know that we will have the teacher or staff interview, same as we've done before. These are ones that if you would like, you could actually give a copy to this to any teachers that need to be interviewed or staff that need interviewed, and they can fill it out for you. You don't have to actually ask them the questions. The other one is the witness and the target interview. Again, this has not changed if you've been trained in the past. This one you don't want them to fill out. You will want them to actually interview them if they are a student. So again, this is the witness and target interview, which has not changed. Then with all of this information, what you're going to do then, the two people on the team are then going to utilize our new form, the School Behavioral Threat Assessment Consideration Checklist. So this replaces what we used to use as our screener. What you're going to do based on the interviews that the two team members have done, you're going to go through this to help you determine if you can resolve it at low or if you need to move to the full threat assessment. Does this matter require a immediate police response? Is there imminent danger? Yes or no? If yes, you're going to follow those other procedures I told you and then move through question 2. Based on the initial report, is there a need to run the full threat assessment? You're going to answer each of the following questions based on those initial interviews. Has the person threatened violence or made any communication about intent or plans of violence? Yes or no? Have other behaviors raised concern about violence to others, self and others, such as sexual assault, dating violence, stalking, cyber stalking, domestic violence assault? If any of these are present, again, you'll need to make sure that you identify and notify the Title IX coordinator. Sorry for this, they had a mistypo here and it says Title IV. It is actually Title IX. I will let the state know. The next question is there a fearful victim or third party? This is really important because the perception of our victims play a huge role. Where the student of concern may say that they didn't mean anything, we need to see if that victim is actually fearful. If they are, even if the aggressor says they didn't mean it, then you would need to mark yes here. And then look through these questions. Has the following occurred? Did the student directly or indirectly threaten to harm a person, group, and or the school? Are there any artistic, written, or symbolic expressions with disturbing or violent content? Belief that they may possess a weapon on campus? Are they demonstrating any imminent warning signs or other early warning signs? Thinking through some of the things we talked about in previous modules, have they been more angry lately? Have they been getting in fights lately? Have their grades diminished? Have they dropped out of groups? So thinking through some of those other warning signs. Have they written something several times? Have they been searching things on the internet? And have they ever made it a threat to harm or kill themselves? Again, if they have it to themselves, then we would also add in the suicide risk assessment. And have they had any escalating pattern or behavior that has been resistive to any interventions you guys have already been provided in the school? And then think through, are there any unanswered questions or another reason to run the full behavioral threat assessment? Then you're going to move on. If it's no to all the questions up in number 2. You're going to document your responses and close the case, but you are going to explain why the case is being closed, and you're going to provide details on page 3 of this, and you will resolve this at low. But if there's any reason that there is yes to any of those questions up there, then you're also going to move through these questions. Is the student known to have an FBA and BIP 504 or an IEP or some type of health plan, which would typically fall under the 504 plan? Yes or no? If it's no, then you will, or unknown, you will run the full behavioral threat assessment. The next question, if it's yes, you're going to notify and involve the EC case manager and or the 504 case manager, and then move to 3A. Is the threatening behavior a known baseline behavior, which is already documented in one of these plans? It has to be documented. So thinking through this, if a student has had some threatening behavior, if they have a goal on their IEP, or if it's addressed on the 504, saying that we are working on 3 out of 4 times that they're going to use more appropriate behavior when addressing other students and not using threatening behavior. That would be that baseline behavior. Right? If they don't have it, then you still need to move through the full threat assessment. If they have it, then you're going to go to question 3B. Can the threatening behavior be managed under these existing things? But you have to have data present to reflect this. So if you already have it as a baseline and you're working on it and they're progressing with their progress monitoring, right, then you can manage it. If you can't manage it, or you feel like you need more information to really make the best decision if the student continues to pose a threat, or if there's any change in that baseline behavior, then you would need to run the behavioral threat assessment. If it is yes, then again, you're going to refer that back to whoever that case manager is to continue, so they can continue their interventions and progress monitoring. So again, your final determination with all those questions, do you need to move forward, or if not? If you need to move forward, then you would mark yes and move to the full threat team, which will go on in the next couple pages. If no, then you're going to use this considerations explanation worksheet to then resolve this at low. Again, you'll have your demographic information. We're hoping when we move to Guardian, this will all self-populate, but until you get trained in our new Guardian platform, you'll need to keep everything on hard copies on this paper, so you'll be able to enter them at a later time. So again, you'll explain what the incident was, what happened, who was involved, and why you're not moving to the full threat assessment. And in here, it's going to be, we were able to resolve it at low. We know that the student doesn't pose a threat anymore, or the student has an IEP, and this is a baseline behavior that's going to be as part of his goal that will be interventions and progress monitoring. And then again, any of those interventions we're providing, it could be that maybe we're going to then maybe do a self-regulation group, maybe look at the IEP, maybe look at the 504, and then you're going to list who was involved. So that's a new screening form, which I'm really pleased with now that we are able to look at the differences with our students that are EC, especially think about our especially our students that fall under the AU. This could possibly fall under them because we do know they make a lot of the same threats. And again, we're here to be able to consult with you on that as you need. So we're really excited about this new form. So we're going to go back to the PowerPoint now. And when we get back to the PowerPoint, we're going to move on to the next step and go through the what we're going to do when we're thinking about what our outcomes are, and thinking through then what the next steps are. So here you can see if everything is low, you're going to resolve. If not, you're going to continue to the next full threat assessment. One of the things that we're really pleased with that the state provided for us, and these are things that will be in a folder for you that I will say, please go back to when you need them. This will definitely help you determine if you can resolve something at low with this consideration form. So you can see here the description of the different things that will let you be able to resolve it at low, right? I'm not going to read this whole thing, but thinking through, is it something that was unrealistic, makes not into violence, really no grievances? Maybe it's more that they were venting. Really, it's vague or indirect. Thinking through, it was taken out of context, so really don't understand developmentally, right? Thinking through maybe that the subject is remorseful and we can provide supports. And then you'll see that these are the actions steps, which are very similar to our previous protocols. If you have been trained before, again, the principal, if they're not the administrator on the team, they'll be notified. You'll still contact the parents and the student of concern parents, which you will learn in a future module. Think through what those interventions on your SIMP plan could be. Down here, it does say notify SRO, and in CMS for low, you do not need to notify your SRO for that. And then again, you're going to develop that monitoring plan. And as you can see here, our monitoring plans for low are now for 90 calendar days, 90 calendar days. When we get to the safety plan module, you will see more on that. If you can't resolve at low and need to move to the full threat assessment, then that administrator is then going to gather the rest of the team members. Again, this also needs to include your student services team member to help with the student safety risk assessment. And then you're also going to utilize multiple sources of data and delegate team members to complete the needed interviews. Again, I showed you all of the different interview forms. They are the same as we've used in the past. The parent guardian form is also the same. Remember that this one is an extremely long interview, and you always want to think through who is the best person to do all of these interviews, who has the best relationship to be able to get the best information. The parent section and the parent module is going to go through a little bit more on when you call parents, how you call parents, because again, that has changed, but the actual questions on the parent guardian interview have remained the same. So after you have done all of those interviews, and make sure you have whoever's doing those interviews do write the answers out on there. We need to maintain those because those are the questions. The answers to those questions are what are going to help your whole team go through and analyze the information using the 11 Secret Services questions on the full threat assessment. So once the whole team comes together, after you've done all the interviews, everyone is going to sit around and you're going to discuss the full threat assessment, which I am now going to open up to show you what that is, what that looks like. So you can see here our full team threat assessment. Again, in our new Guardian platform, we're hoping that this top level of identifying information for students is going to remain the same, and then we'll hopefully be able to pop in the different sources of information you got and who did the interviews like we had. So our 11 questions are exactly the same. These have not changed. These are research-based. These are leading practice. And again, you are going to go based on all of the answers you've gotten from all of your interviews and go through to determine the answers to the all the questions that the Secret Service has provided. And then after, depending on what your answers are and how many yeses you have, we have no concrete way of saying if you have 2 yeses, it's low degree. Just, use your common sense if you feel it's low, moderate, or high. Again, if you don't have answers, it's really going to bump up if it's a higher level of concern. So again, you're going to go through all of the 11 questions that we have before. And then when you get through the questions and the numbers of level or high, thinking through, again, other additional circumstances that might affect the attack. So thinking through, is their family history? Are they a victim of bullying? Do they lack supervision? And then after, you're going to go then through, identify the number of times that the threat assessment team determined each of the degrees of concerns below. So how many high degree, how many medium, and how many low? If the majority are low, then you can go ahead and resolve it at low here at the full threat. If there's only a couple low and mainly medium and maybe one high, then you would resolve at medium. At moderate. Thinking through, we're going to show you again what a low threat is, a threat which poses minimal risk, a moderate threat. They don't appear to pose a threat of violence or serious harm, but at this time they exhibit behaviors that can indicate potential intent. I'm going to go through some more of these identifiers on the next couple of pages. If you have the majority of high and just a couple medium, then you would resolve it at high. Our imminent threats are ones that you would already have known that it's an imminent threat, right? These are the ones where there's complete action. These are the ones where you already have weapons on campus, those types of things where we know they have a history of being homicidal. They are operating in predatory mode. So again, the only one that we typically can predict would be if it's imminent. And so we know that based on our initial what's going on, some will know, the only one we know will go straight to something would be that imminent. Other things we need to think about: the age of the student, the developmental level, credibility of the account, documented history of aggression. Big one, refusal to participate and answer questions. And this would be the aggressor and or the parents or guardians. If they will not answer, we have to err on the side of caution. And at this point, if they're not, please feel free to call the crisis phone for support. Also remember that based on all of this, if the student is going to be disciplined, or if they're going to end up with mental health support outside of school, we definitely want that reentry meeting utilizing that student service intervention monitoring plan prior to them going back to the classroom. So that's our new full threat. It has changed some since we have changed over to our new protocol. And now I'm going to go through the different areas of what moderate, high, and imminent are. Okay, so really thinking through then, with the team has organized and analyzed the data, do we know if it's low, moderate, high, or imminent, right? Thinking through what the subject, what the aggressor, what kind of need for help or intervention, mental health care, referrals to student school-based mental health, do they need mentoring? And remember, again, we'll monitor the low for 90 days. But again, with our new plan, when we get to the safety plan, you'll see the changes in how we monitor. And then we're going to also talk about the summary conclusions and recommendations summary form. I'm going to show that to you after I show you the characteristics of what moderate, high, and imminent are. So again, here is what moderate. Thinking through, they, again, maybe not appear to pose a threat of violence or serious harm, but they exhibit those behaviors that we know are concerning. Right, they may acknowledge violent thoughts, but no intent to follow through. No specific details on the plan. No intention to act on it. Willing to look at other alternatives. The threat is plausible, but doesn't have specifics, right? There might be some grievances, but the situation's not hopeless, right? So thinking through some of these things and then going through what then you'll do. Again, we're going to alert that district administrator if they're not part of the team, provide that direct supervision until we can have the parents take the students home, think through what the consequences are carrying out the threat, refer for mental health assessment and mental health counseling if needed. If you're a middle school or high school for moderate, you will notify their SRO. If you're elementary, you don't need to do that. And then thinking through what interventions you have, making sure you do have that release of information for the parents, especially if they're involved with someone other than school-based mental health, and then really documenting everything in that safety plan. For high, this is where the person or situation really does pose a threat of violence and exhibits those behaviors that indicate both continuing intent to harm, that ongoing ideation, continue to talk about it, right? And they have the ability to acquire the capacity to carry out the plan, right? That planning and preparation. It's plausible, it's specific. There is an identified target or a strong indication of a target, right? Thinking through that there are some steps that they've already taken, thinking through that they do have that strong grievance and intent on violence is their only solution. No supports, if they're resistive to problem solving. Again, thinking through those questions on the Secret Service, questions on our questions when you have the higher ones. If there's an increased intensity and severity in tone, thinking through if they have that thoughts of violence, have they been searching a lot on the internet? And then thinking through, is there a possibility need for a potential psychiatric emergency where we would need to either call mobile crisis to come and assist or have the parents take them straight to one of our emergency rooms. And again, you have the steps of what you need to do. Here it's a superintendent or designee. This at high is where you would let your learning community know. Again, the building administrator, if they're not there, if the principal's not part of this team, definitely your SRO. And here for our elementary schools, you would definitely let 60/30 know. You're going to have provide direct supervision until the parent picks them up. Think through what your discipline measures are. Again, this may require immediate law enforcement intervention or hospitalization at this point. When we are updating parents, especially at high, we really want 2 staff members making this contact and documenting on that parent interview form. Again, as always, we're notifying the intended victim and parents because of duty to warn. FERPA does not apply here. And again, with this one, we will do that reentry plan depending on what the outcome is for their student. Again, will we be doing a DTM and possibly alternative placement, or maybe mental health alternative placement upon returning? And then you're going to have the intervention plan and documentation, which carries through for all of our levels. And then imminent, again, as I mentioned, this is one that we actually would only when we'd be able to predict. Typically, this is one where they have that immediate threat of violence, right? The one that possibly has brought some type of weapon on campus. And we know that we've already called law enforcement by the point we've gotten to this point. Their language is action oriented. They have that plan. They have clear pathways. And we know we have that potential need for psychiatric emergency. The steps on what you need to do are basically the same as for high. We do know for this one that, again, the majority of these cases would end up with recommending to the parent or guardian need for mental health support immediately. So now I'm going to go back and share what the summary conclusion form looks like. Because with this, we want you to see that this is the form that will need to go to all parents. And again, in Guardian, we're hoping that all of the background information will already be loaded in there, as well as where we got the information from. You'll be able to do, again, just that brief description of the behavioral threat assessment, what your summary of findings are, all of your conclusions. Also, with the parents, thinking through what those risk factors were, because again, using what those risk factors are going to help us determine what that support plan is going to look like when they come back, as well as their protective factors. Again, and then any recommendations. Again, this is required to give to all parents at all levels, low, moderate, high, and for imminent. So that's the end of this module. Thanks for listening, and we will go into what safety planning looks like in the next module.